we go. So the usual thing, do a nice long Om together, then I'll chant the refuge prayer 3 times, and then we'll begin. Buddham sharanam gacchami, dharmam sharanam gacchami, sangham sharanam gacchami. Buddham sharanam gacchami, dharmam sharanam gacchami, sangham sharanam gacchami. Buddham sharanam gacchami, dharmam sharanam gacchami, sangham sharanam gacchami. Namaste. So welcome back to Wednesday Night Mantras. So we're on week 3 now of the Sita Tārā, the White Tārā Mantra practice. So for those of you who may be watching the video, I know you guys have all been here for the whole practice, but let me just go ahead and do, what am I doing? That. So, for those of you who may be watching this video later, there are 2 other videos that have about 20 minutes to half an hour worth of discussion. The first one talks about what the purpose of the mantra is, that drawing the consciousness into the present moment so that one can experience a more full experience of life, and one can have a greater fullness of life rather than the longevity or the more years that is sort of the standard explanation, which, as I say there, always important to remember. More years is definitely not always helpful, because it could just be more years of going through the same crap that you've been going through, right? It doesn't get you anywhere. The question is more about how are you living the time that you have. So the purpose of this mantra is to allow you to exist as fully as possible within each moment of your life, and therefore have the chance to expand your consciousness. We can really only expand our consciousness to the degree to which we are existing in the present moment. And pretty much all yoga practices are designed to help us to be in that place. You know, if only for the period of time in which we are actually meditating. You know, hopefully over time, the idea is that the state of consciousness that's developed in the meditation becomes something that permeates the rest of your life, and you can begin to live your whole life that way, in that state, which is very desirable, very good thing. So really, when we're talking about that, the merit and the knowledge, the puṇya and the jñāna, that's really what it's about. It's about the consciousness of what's going on, and to increase or bring to greater fullness your understanding of who you are and what your purpose is in this particular lifetime. So, and then the second one has the translations of each of the words, the second video. So you can check in on the YouTube page, the YouTube channel for those videos and get all of that information. So I just want to spend a little bit of time today talking about who Tārā is and how she sort of fits in to this whole Buddhist cosmology. So first of all, important to understand that there really are two streams of philosophical reality, I guess we could say, within Buddhism. One is called the Hinayana and the other is called the Mahayana. And the Hinayana, which I would call, there's lots of translations for that. But so yana means vehicle. So the question then is, what does the other part of the word mean? In this case, Hinayana, I would say it means the core vehicle in Buddhism, right? So in Hinayana Buddhism, the only thing that's important, or the only thing that matters, is what the actual physical person of the Buddha said during the about 50 years or so in which he was alive, from the time in which his nirvana experience occurred until he passed away sometime in his 80s. So those words were recorded by his students, and we still have them today. The biggest collection of those comes in a series of texts called the Pali Canon. And so for Hinayana, of which the branch that's most, there are many different Hinayana traditions. The one that still exists and is most prevalent in the world today is called Theravada. So if you're dealing with Buddhism, particularly from Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Burma, I should say Myanmar, other areas like that, then you're talking about this Hinayana tradition, the Theravada tradition, and Sri Lanka also, southern India and Sri Lanka. The Mahayana tradition of Buddhism then is thought to be, it's something that emerged later on, maybe I would say about 200 years or so. It started to emerge after the Buddha's death. So we're still talking about, well over 2,000 years ago, right, that this began, but it was not the original thing. So the original thing was the Buddha had his enlightenment experience. He traveled around the Indian subcontinent and taught people about how he became enlightened, and took great pains to explain to people that he was the same as everyone else. And so therefore, if he could achieve enlightenment, then anyone could achieve it. And that's really the basis of the Buddhist path, is kind of surrounding that idea. Now, what Mahayana Buddhism presents is the concept that the traveling around in a physical body and teaching as a human to other humans is not the only work that the Buddha was doing while he was here. And so Mahayana definitely goes directly into this concept, into a bunch of very mystical concepts right away, and engages in some ideas of what the Buddha was doing and the teachings that he was giving in a very different way from the ones that he gave as a physical human being. So basically, like, for example, the whole concept of mantra in Buddhism, the way that we're practicing it here, is not something that's part of the Hinayana tradition. The Buddha, as a human being, never taught anything about it. However, the Buddha as a spirit being, essentially, or an expanded consciousness being, or an ascended being, taught quite a bit about this. And what it really has to do with is the idea of, so Mahayana Buddhism basically posits the idea that Buddhas are a phenomenon that occurs in the universe at various different times. Normally, we have an enlightenment experience at the moment of our death. And so when that happens, then we no longer need to return back to another lifetime. It's very rare that somebody actually, especially in Buddhism, in the Vedic tradition, it's far more common for this to happen, but in Buddhism it's stated that it's very rare for somebody to, be fully engaged in nirvana, to be a fully enlightened being, and yet still be living in a fleshy body, essentially. To still be living in this sort of finite consciousness reality that we are all existing in now. That's very, very rare, and that's what kind of defines a Buddha, right? Is somebody who had an enlightenment experience, but they are not dead yet. They're still existing in our reality, and so therefore their consciousness is in an infinite state. They're like a conduit directly into unity consciousness, and the teachings that they give come from that place, right? So it's very valuable information for us. And so the idea here is that this occurs every once in a while. This happens, and a Buddha appears and is available to give teachings to people if they're up for it, right? If they are interested, and that in the universe, so to speak, this is considered to be a very special event. Whenever a Buddha appears somewhere in the universe, not necessarily just on the earth, but anywhere, could be happening anywhere that there's a planet with living sentient consciousness beings who are sort of in a similar state to humans, right? I think Buddhism very sort of, I don't know if I would say explicitly, but I think more than any other spiritual path, perhaps any of the major, let's say major spiritual paths or religions that exist on Earth now, is almost directly stating that humans are not the only sentient beings in the universe, right? And that there are many others, in fact. And they exist in a similar kind of a state to how we are, and Buddhas appear to them and give them teachings from unity consciousness. And there are beings out in the cosmos who exist in all sorts of different states. A few weeks ago, we worked with some of them. We were doing the Bodhisattva path, in which we were working with some ascended beings who are not Buddhas, right? They're not fully enlightened like a Buddha would be, but they are also very, very powerful, very expanded, and are existing in the universe solely to help other people to achieve their own enlightenment. So whenever a Buddha appears somewhere, right, then all of these, spiritual beings, and perhaps, the Mahayana talks about how many of the Buddha's most closest and most advanced disciples or devotees would get to sit in on these teachings, but then like tens of thousands of bodhisattvas from around the universe would converge on the earth in order to receive teachings from our Buddha, right? And so what it does is it posits this concept that Buddhism is not something that's limited solely to humans, and is not a phenomenon that is solely something of the earth, but is a universal concept and experience that anyone in the state of being a sentient being, and having the kind of consciousness that we have, is capable of experiencing this. When the history of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, is talked about, it's expressed about how he was engaged in his spiritual path for millions upon millions of years in order to achieve the state of consciousness that he's in, which is, far longer than humans have been around. So he must have been somewhere else. He must have come from somewhere else. He may appear to us as human, right? Except for, the multiple arms and all that kind of stuff. But when you're in that state of consciousness, you can appear as whatever you want, and who knows what he may have been previous to that. So this is a very old idea in Buddhism, goes back a couple of thousand years. I mean, there's a lot of other indigenous traditions in various parts of the world that have this kind of concept of, humanity as one, kind of idea of consciousness amongst a multiplicity that exists in the universe. And this is something that Buddhism sort of explicitly states as a truth. So what Mahayana Buddhism is about placing our Buddha and the human experience within the larger context of what's going on with what is called in Buddhism the Dharma throughout the universe. And it's one of the things that I find kind of interesting, is that if this is true, if this is a real thing, then the Dharma or these teachings that come from Buddhism might be the bridge that allows us to communicate with other beings, like beings from other planets, right? If we ever happen to come into contact with them, because they would have it also, right? And so those would be concepts that would be very much the same for them and for us, and there would be a certain commonality, even if many other things about us were different. I don't know, kind of speculating here off on some kind of a tangent, but I think it's just kind of a cool idea that, you know, humans are, it's not something, it's helpful, I think, to place humans into a context where we are not utterly unique and special and the favored children of God, right? That's useful, I think, in terms of helping to develop our humility and to understand that we are part of a network of consciousness that extends throughout the universe and emerges in all sorts of different forms, right? So that's a good thing. So one of the concepts that's developed in Mahayana Buddhism is this idea of what are called the 5 families of the Buddha, and it's sort of an expression of the Buddha on a cosmic scale. I like to refer to them as the cosmic Buddhas, and there are 5 of them, and they represent stages of evolution towards enlightenment. The 4 families are delineated by colors and a whole bunch of different symbolic attributes, right? So, for example, the Vajra family is the Buddha Akshobhya, and the color is dark blue. The symbol is a Vajra, etc., etc. You know, Amoga Siddhi is the green Buddha, and they all have, this is a very complicated thing, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but the point being, each of these 5 families then has not only a Buddha, but there's also a Tārā that goes with each family. So there are 5 Tāras. And so there's the 5 colors, right, then are blue, yellow, red, green, and white. Kind of in that order. Like when you're doing a meditation on the mandala of the cosmic Buddhas, that's the order that you go in. Not to say that one, you know, so basically the four actual colors, the blue, the yellow, the green, and the red, are all equal to each other. But white then sits in the center of the mandala. And just like in colors, the way that we experience them, white is the combination of all other colors in perfect balance with each other, right? So when you have all other colors in an exact balance, then the resulting color is white, right? That's the way that works. And so that's played out in the mandala. The Buddhists understood this idea, and that's played out in the mandala in the sense of, you know, when you have all of these separate ideas about what enlightenment is and how it works and different ways to approach it, it's a color. But then when you get to the center, when you're the closest that you can be to enlightenment, then it becomes white, right? And that's the last thing you experience before you are beyond colors, really, so to speak. So each of these families with its color has a particular Tārā that's associated with them. Now the Tāras are, and I feel like I can, you know, one of the cool things for me is I think the sort of fluidity with which I experience the Buddhist tradition and the Vedic tradition, and sort of going smoothly back and forth between them. Because in that sense, it's very, very easy for me to see the parallels between the Vedic conception of Divine Mother with her various manifestations, like Lakshmi or Saraswati, Durga, Kali, all of these other manifestations of Divine Mother, where Divine Mother is so infinitely expansive that we are unable to conceive of her or have a really any kind of a relationship with her, because our experience of consciousness is so finite. So in order to connect with us, then Divine Mother divides herself up into these various manifestations of goddess energy, each one having its own particular, her own particular role in the universe. So, for example, Lakshmi being about abundance and fertility, Saraswati is knowledge and creativity, Durga is protection and courage, other things of that nature. And then we can interact with those goddesses, right? where Divine Mother herself is so far beyond us that there's no way for us to really connect. These goddesses give us the opportunity to connect with her because they are more finite versions of her, but at the same time, each one of them is Divine Mother, right? The Tāras, it's the same exact thing. You have this idea of Divine Mother, and in Buddhism, Divine Mother herself, as the infinite energy of which all of our reality is composed, is referred to by the name puṇya paramita, the perfection of wisdom. And this goddess, puṇya paramita, is thought to be so expanded and so great that only somebody like a Buddha in a state of nirvana is capable of perceiving her and understanding and connecting to her energy. But the way that puṇya paramita manifests into the universe is as the Tāras. And there's a number of different ways of thinking about the Tāras, but they're very similar, right? So blue Tārā is actually, who's with Akshobhya in the Vajra family, is very similar to Sarasvati, right? Very much of a knowledge or a wisdom goddess. Let me make sure I get all the names correct here. The next one around, yellow Tārā, who's called Vasudhana, is similar to Lakshmi, like a prosperity, fertility goddess. Blue, red Tārā, Kurukula, is I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that. There's not a direct correlation between red Tārā and one of the Vedic goddesses that I know of. And green Tārā, Kadiravani, is similar to Durga, sort of this protection sort of energy. And then there's white Tārā in the center, whom we're working with now. Her name Chinta Chakra. Chinta Chakra. Here we're seeing sort of, again, like much as the color white combines all of the others, white Tārā combines some qualities of all of the other Tāras, essentially. And in particular, again, a wisdom kind of a concept. So white Tārā ends up being as close as we can get, perhaps, to puṇya paramita, the perfection of wisdom goddess herself, while still existing in the state of consciousness that we are in. This is one way of looking at it. There are others, but I find this one to be particularly useful. So, it kind of gives you this idea that white Tārā and this idea of presence and being in the moment and like actually experiencing the reality of your existence as it is happening is central to the entire concept of what we're doing on our spiritual path. And in fact it's so powerful that it's right at the doorway to enlightenment itself, so that if you can actually be there, right, then that's one of the being 100% present is one of the definitions of being enlightened. Essentially, it's like if you're 100% present in your life, then you are actually an enlightened being at that time. We are generally not that, right? We're some percentage of the time being present, and we're trying to increase that percentage as we go through. That's what our spiritual practices are really for. So it is also worth noting that there's a second green Tārā who is a little bit different in the sense that she is also a bodhisattva. And there's a whole story around how this bodhisattva came to started out as a normal person like us and went through the whole process of becoming this very, very ascended being, high consciousness being. And she took on the form of the green Tārā, Kadiravani, and I guess because that was the path that she was taking to get there was through green Tārā and the family of Amoghasiddhi, the Buddha Amoghasiddhi. So there are actually two green Tāras. One is the sort of cosmic green Tāra, and the other one is the Bodhisattva green Tāra, who's here to help us to move forward, rather than being a manifestation of Divine Mother on a goddess level. So it can be a little bit confusing in that sense, but the mantra for the Bodhisattva Tārā is the root mantra of Tara herself. So Om tāre, tuttāre, ture, svāhā is going to connect us into the Bodhisattva version of Tara. And then all of the other ones, like this White Tārā Mantra, are that that root mantra with the extra words thrown in that help to connect you to that particular, the function of that particular color of the deity. So hopefully this is making some sense as we go around it. There's also this concept, and Stephanie had asked me about this last week, about the 21 Tāras. I'm not super clear on exactly how these two things relate, because 5 and 21 don't go into each other quite all that evenly. But 21 is a very important number in Buddhism, so it's not ultimately surprising. But to answer your question, Stephanie, this Tara that we are working with here is number 4 in the list of the 21 Taras. So that's a wonderful thing to get involved with. I haven't studied it that much myself because I've been so involved in this other thing with the 5 families. But that can be another path to get you into that whole kind of thing. And there are other sort of goddess beings that are maybe emerge or emanate out of the Taras, or in some way emanate out of Prajna Paramita herself, that have different functions as well, like the Dakinis that are so important in Tibetan Buddhism and other things of that nature. So just know that when we're chanting this mantra, the White Tārā Mantra, what we're doing is we're connecting in to this cosmic goddess energy, and using that to help to bring us closer and closer to an enlightenment state wherein we will be able to experience Divine Mother in her fullness as Prajna Paramita. Okay, so I think that's that. Any questions about any of that before we begin? No, it all makes sense. Okay, good. Then I will bring up the mantra. And we'll be ready to go. Just get the clutter out of the way. I'm sad that that website is gone, because it just had this one page on it that was so great. It just had an image of each of the 21 Taras, and so you could see what the color was, and then the mantra that went with each one of those. Which there's the 21 praises of Tara is not the same. Those are they're not mantras per se, but each of the 21 Taras does have a mantra, and I don't know what happened to that site. It's unfortunate. Okay, so we're ready to begin chanting. Om tāre, tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre, tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre ture mamāyuḥ puṇya jñāna puṣṭim kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Om tāre tuttāre, ture mamāyuḥ, puṇya jñāna puṣṭim, kuru svāhā. Okay, so that concludes our White Tārā practice. Obviously, if you were to continue this for the next week, if you've been doing it already, until next Wednesday when we start something new, that'll be 21 days, very auspicious for Buddhist mantra practice in particular. The 21 number has a relationship numerologically to the number 49, which is the number of days that the Buddha sat underneath the Bodhi tree. Right? So he meditated for 40 days and became enlightened, and then sat for another 9 days, experiencing that and deciding what he was going to do next. And 49, of course, is 7 times 7, so 7 becomes a big deal in a big numerological deal in Buddhism, and 21 then is 7 times 3, which is 7 being the Buddha number and 3 being a number of completion. So kind of like that number works out very nicely in that sense. So I'm going to do the closing mantras, and then we'll stop the recording, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask at that time. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all so much for joining in on this very, very powerful and important practice. So